Live on everything else now. Let me see if that'll free up Insta. If not, we're going to go without it. Say hi to everybody, Lindsay.
Hi. Yes, I'm aware I look like Madam Mim. This was not
There
intentional.
we go. Insta's coming up.
Still can't see you on TikTok, and Eric's not here, so I can't use his phone.
All right. Well, we are 1, 2, and here comes TikTok now. Little bit of a delay on these. Bear with us, guys. We're trying to connect multiple sessions here. For those of you jumping on, because I see people jumping on already. There we go. I think we're live. I think we're live everywhere, Linz. All right.
All right.
Welcome back to Boy Meets Squirrel. Hey, do you notice something different? They got to pick one of the two of us.
Oh.
Because we both have different. So I have two different eye colors. People have noticed that on my videos. That's because this eye works and this eye doesn't. Because I had surgery on this side. So I have one black eye and one blue eye now. But somebody else has a slight change. Her beautiful blonde hair went full feminist. I've been waiting all day to say that one.
It was not intentional, guys. I was supposed to be getting rid of a color, and I turned my hair purple instead. So
Lindsay went full feminist on us, so we get to mock her. Although, to be fair, did you see my message to you where I said you need to reach out to Green Cowland Lynn?
Yes, and she gave me some tips if I wanted to make it purpler. Is that a real word? It is now purpler, and
she does have beautiful purple hair.
She does have beautiful purple hair.
Oh, Superfly Wonderwish says one of the two of you has lovely goatees. Well, there you go, Lindsay. You have a beautiful goatee also. Yeah, we're gonna. Oh, my man Ryan is with us on Instagram. Ryan Carrison, who I interviewed on my podcast about false allegations. Ryan, welcome. Glad to see you're joining us. If I could link them in, I would. So today we're going to be talking about false allegations. For those that don't know, Lindsay and I are actually writing a book on it.
Yes, we are.
What's our working title? I forgot. You have
just the tip.
Just the tip. Let it settle. Let it percolate. I don't know that that'll be the actual title, but we'll see.
With the picture of an iceberg. So I mean, it's iceberg theory. So
yeah,
I thought it was funny also.
It's hilarious, I think, too. I've actually seen her mock-up for the cover. It's actually very good. But we've started working on it, and we've been interviewing people. We've been talking to people. And basically what we're going to be doing is covering the length and breadth of false allegations, right?
Yes, it's a common misconception, and I see it misquoted all the time, that people assume that false allegations are limited to SA and or grape allegations, usually grape, and it's simply not true. They take many forms, and that off quoted statistic that everyone loves to tout out, that only 2 to 5% or 2 to 10, depending on which source you read, is false. What it fails to take into account is those are only the ones that are found false in a court of law. They are not all those that are found false, and then the person who makes them, having been found false, usually through the course of a police investigation or a criminal investigation, not a criminal trial, but a criminal investigation, before it goes to trial, before it even gets charged, the people who make them aren't charged for them. So they don't show up anywhere as someone made a false allegation. They're just kind of like, it's false, but we're not going to do anything about it.
Yeah, and I've interviewed law enforcement officers, including Officer Nate. For those of you on the various social medias, he's pretty big. He's the guy that got LeBron pretty good back in the day. But when Nate was on the podcast with me, and I've had a few other law enforcement officials on with me, Nate was saying he was a detective, I believe, that was investigating these type of crimes, and he puts the number at between 70 and 80% are false. I've had others tell me it's somewhere between 50 and 60. I've had attorneys tell me it's somewhere around 70. So none of those, and even I remember Nate talking about it because it kind of shocked me a little bit, and I'm kind of in the know, but he was saying that they were, he had times where he knew they were lying, he could prove they were lying, and he was told, "Don't you dare arrest the woman, don't you dare do anything, throw it in the trash, like literally take the whole file and throw it in the trash, don't even put it in our records." So that misnomer, and I've heard 1 to 2% was thrown out at me this week. You know, that number is complete BS. It's bogus. And as Lindsay said, it's only cases that went to trial and where they were convicted.
Well, it's not even that they were convicted of a false allegation. It's actually only like during the course of a trial, they made an accusation, and then through the course of that trial, it was proven that, oh, that accusation was false.
Right.
And even then, it didn't always end with the person who made the accusation being charged. It's just those that are proven false during the course of an investigation. And sometimes that investigation is, unaliving and not have, but it has an element of this person is also guilty of this, or you're doing a character witness and it's, oh, well, they did this or something like that in a more civil area. And not most people who make false allegations, and most of them are women. That's not to say
there are some men, to be fair.
There are some men that are, to be fair, but the grand majority of them are women, and they are never charged for it, which I think is the greatest crime. Because you always hear the argument is, you always hear, and I hear women say this to me often. I'm sure you get it too, but we don't need to be talking about false allegations because they're so rare, and talking about false allegations means that legitimate victims won't come forward. I'm like, that is complete and utter BS reasoning. It's the opposite. It's the opposite, actually, because false allegations are the reason why legitimate victims are not believed. It's the boy who cried wolf.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and having talked to many law enforcement officers about it, and DAs for that matter, it's exactly what Lindsay said. Is the actual victims get lost in the shuffle. There's this is years ago. I had a DA tell me, "Look, we only have so many resources," and he's trying to defend his staff because the allegations are made that they don't take them seriously, or that they don't do investigations and all that. And I think in some ways that's a fair thing to say in some jurisdictions. That they're chronically understaffed. They may have 1 or 2 assistant DAs assigned to these type of things. But he was saying that there are times they have actual victims and they do get lost in the shuffle because they're dealing with so many known false ones. And they have to take them seriously, even though many times they know right away, this doesn't sound right, And I've had police officers say the same thing.
The system gets bogged down with all of the fake ones, and they have to treat them all seriously because the one time they don't, it'll be proven real, and then something bad will happen. So the one bad apple spoils the bunch because the actual resources needed for the real victims are all being tied up with the false ones. So I still maintain that a false allegation or a false accusation should carry the same or double the sentence as a conviction for whatever they were accusing a person of falsely. And that maybe if we start punishing the people for making these false allegations, they'd stop doing it. Because right now they're doing it with impunity.
Well, there's one problem with that. It's not a crime. It is not a listed crime in any state. It
should be.
It should be. And there may be some countries that it is, but they'll generally lump it under fraud. Now that Tennessee has made some changes, they're starting to address it a little bit, but the reality is in almost, I'll say 99% of the jurisdictions, it's not viewed as a crime.
True. So the accusation itself is not a crime, but what they can be charged for is fraudulent or
filing a false report,
following a false report, and misappropriation of police resources and time.
But that's
even that
misdemeanor.
Well, yes, but even that would be a step in the right direction.
Well, I mean, the classic case to talk about with that is Good Time Charlie,
Hmm.
right? So I had Charlie on my show back in January, and we got into that because his accuser, and I'm not going to name her name because I'm not going to give her any more publicity. His accuser was proven beyond any doubt to be lying. And the most she got charged with is filing a false report. It's a misdemeanor. It's not even jail time. Now, she was in jail for other things, and she could, in theory, go to jail for this, but she's going to get a slap on the wrist. And his life was destroyed. You know, the other side of it, to be fair, and Ryan was on, you know, Ryan Carrison, his ex girlfriend, I think it was. I don't think he was married to her. Correct me if on that, Ryan, if you're still on. His ex did end up going to prison in the UK. She got sentenced to, I believe it was somewhere around 4 years, but she got day passes to get out. I just saw this a couple of weeks ago, and she got herself pregnant by another man. So guess what? She's getting released from prison. Where's the accountability? Even when we get someone sent to jail for knowingly destroying a man's life, all she got to do is go out and get pregnant again. Why is she even getting a day pass to start with?
Because accountability is kryptonite.
But yeah, it is. But it just speaks to where we're at as a society. And, you know, it's not just the US, it's not just the UK. And I know you've talked to people in Australia, New Zealand, many countries, you know,
Across the Western world, pretty much all of the countries, when you break it down, except for some very few European countries with very small homogenous populations, any
mhm.
country with a diverse population is going to have these kinds of problems. Most of Western Europe, even some parts of Eastern Europe, Russia, the UK, Canada, Australia, even places like Brazil, which is not as developed as the West, but it's still of the countries in South
Pretty
America.
developed
It's
country,
pretty
though.
developed
Yeah.
for South America, and it's across the board, and it seems to be a human problem, not a gendered one like everyone wants to make it out to be, meaning that because we want to play the weight game, which I made a comment on a video that I made earlier today, that in the grand scheme of things, it's not a gender war, because it's, in the grand scheme of things, men offend more greatly in certain areas, women offend more greatly or more grievously in certain areas, but when you add it all up, it balances out, because lo and behold, men and women are both capable of being absolute shit people. It's a human problem.
It's a huge, exactly. It's because we're both human, both
Yes,
men and
that's what
women
I
are
meant
human.
when I
Yeah.
said that it's not a gendered issue.
Yeah.
Evil has no gender. You can, and people will sit there and say, "Well, it's all men or it's all women." And I'm like, "No,
No,
because
there's no absolutes anywhere.
there's no absolutes. There's no totality in any group."
And the thing is I've heard some guys, you know, say, well, we need to start doing the same thing to them. I don't advocate for that.
No,
I understand. I understand
I
that thought.
understand the sentiment, but
Totally.
an eye for an eye makes the whole world blind.
No, that there's no good that's going to come from that. What we need to be doing, all of us, is standing up. And I argue we're standing up for the true victims, as we kind of talked about a little while ago, and reaching out and saying to a DA in our area, you know, I'm aware of this situation. Why haven't you prosecuted? Because they never hear that side.
Right.
They only hear from the feminists and they never hear from the guys saying, you know, so and so was, you know, falsely accused. You said he was innocent. Why aren't you prosecuting the false accuser for whatever, right? But nobody does that. Nobody holds these DAs accountable. I've interviewed them many times on my radio show. I've talked to them off air. It's the same thing, by the way, with domestic violence, right? Is they don't hear anything from the men's side, and the squeaky wheel gets the grease. And that's why I say it's not just us that needs to hold them accountable. Everyone does, right? You and I can do it all day long, Lindsay,
Mhm.
but we're two people. We're going against literally hundreds, if not thousands. All what now used to do, the National Organization of Women used to do, is they had their email list, and they would put out a thing, blast this person, judge, DA, whatever, with emails or letters or phone calls, or back in the day it was phone calls, and they'd get tens of thousands of them to do it. That's
Man, I
why
gotta
they
step
got
away for a minute.
okay. That's why they got where they got, is because they were able to then um be the squeaky wheel and get the attention on that. And that's where we all need to speak up, because the fact that we stay silent, and I hate to say it, folks, I know we're all watching this on social media right now, but saying anything on social media doesn't affect politicians. They don't even see it. And I say that as someone who speaks out on social media, but I'm also talking to politicians pretty much now on a weekly basis. The thing that we all need to keep in mind right now is this is a big election cycle, and I'm not talking about the presidency. I don't really give two craps about the presidency, but
No, you're
all of the House is up for re-election.
and not to
Um,
mention all of the local elections that are happening, and you're actually gonna get more bang for your buck locally than you are on the federal level. I mean, yes,
it's
the
more
federal
important
level
than
does help, but it's
it
more
does.
important to
State
focus.
level is the biggest
State
one.
level is the
Yeah.
biggest one.
Because the state laws are written by your state legislature. So where I am in North Carolina, and by the way, it's both parties. Let me make this very clear. Neither party is better than the other. They both suck when it comes to this stuff. That's why I don't support either one of them. Having talked with some of them and knowing that, most of the House is up in North Carolina and most of the Senate, the odds are it's probably going to be a Republican supermajority. Well, my argument to the Republican Party is step up and do something, right? Because you're actually supporting the women's groups. You claim you're neutral because they tell me that all. Well, we're not like them. Well, you're no different than them. And I don't want to get too far into politics, but
Well, yeah, it becomes a prove it. You
yeah.
can't keep blaming we can't do anything because of them. Okay, well, they're not in power anymore. You have nothing blocking your way. Why haven't you done anything? And it's
So
like, what? I was,
yeah. North Carolina's got a $10 billion surplus. I said, give me $500,000 to open a shelter for male victims of domestic violence in my area. Oh, well, what do we need that for? You got to see them backtrack. Well, that's a pretty big financial commitment. $500,000 when you got 10 billion sitting in the bank. Are you kidding me? Right. And that's what I'm talking about, is we as a society need to hold them accountable to that, because as Lindsay said, and I've said, we want to help the true victims that, unfortunately have something happen to them. We don't want it to get lost amongst these rampant false allegations, and they're exploding right now. There isn't a day that goes by I don't hear from a half a dozen guys and occasionally women that are dealing with it. And I'm seeing some on the comments, as I've got 3 different screens of comments open, but they're all chirping in. If you've dealt with a false allegation, let us know in the comments, right? If you're willing to.
I'm starting to see an uptick in women getting accused of false allegations towards women in family court, because it is like the video that I did earlier showing that mothers abuse at higher rates than fathers by far. And the second group is mothers' boyfriends. And with the advent of social media and everyone gets to share this, they're all talking to each other, and the truly bad dads, the ones we don't advocate for, they see this, and because it is such a high probability, they latch on to it. And as well as I do, guys know as well, and now women are learning this the hard way. Once the allegation is made, it is really hard to fight from behind home base. Like, you're already behind the start. You're already pushed back. So they're like, well, Well, and they fall into this, and the women are now experiencing the reality that so many men have faced for the longest time, is they're saying, but surely I'll be believed because it's not true. It's not true. And I was like, yeah, we know, but it's harder to prove a negative than it is a positive.
When judges and DAs and all look at this stuff, their number one goal is to not get themselves in trouble. So the one thing, and I've talked about it before, family court judges' biggest fear is, for example, not issuing a TRO or a stay away order, and the guy or the girl actually goes and does something. Because then they're going to be in the paper saying, well, the victim tried to get a TRO and you didn't grant one. What a horrible person you are, blah, blah, blah. And then the judge gets trashed. So that's why they just grant them. They don't even think about it.
Yeah, but then it's kind of like a catch-22. You're kind of damned if you do and damned if you don't, because on one hand, again, what if something happens? On the other hand, you're obscuring the justice system because it is supposed to be innocent until proven guilty.
Supposed to be being
the key word. So, I mean, I understand the tricky situation, but something has to give, because right now it's being misused more than it is being.
It's being weaponized.
It's being weaponized.
I'm not going to pull punches on it. It's being weaponized.
It's well, yeah. It has been weaponized in more cases than it has been used correctly.
Right.
So something needs to be done. Now, does that mean that the unfortunate? It's the sad. And this is a quote: "A sad calculus of war." This is not war, but the quote is applicable. The sad calculus of war is that you have to do the least amount of harm, but that still means that some harm is going to slip through the cracks. So maybe we allow judges to, especially judges who are not elected, that are just appointed, to be held accountable for their crappy decisions. And yeah, maybe sometimes something falls through the cracks, but as long as the overall output is overwhelmingly positive, because you cannot have totality in anything. I think a lot of people are trying to aim for, well, we have to find a solution that has totality and everything's going to be good. I was like, well, first of all, you can't legislate morality no matter how hard you try. And every time you do try, you end up creating a bigger rift.
Correct.
And you also can't legislate, all of the different quantitative choices, the million odd choices that spawn off in all the different, infinite reality theories. So you're going to have some people are going to fall through the cracks. It is inevitable because no system is perfect. What you need to do is find a system that does more harm than good by quite a bit. And right now, we need to find a system that does more harm than good, or no more good than harm. Sorry,
that's what I thought.
I'm sorry.
Wait a minute.
I said that wrong. It's the purple hair, guys. It rotted my brain.
Say that the blonde hair is gone. I can't make that crack.
You need to find. I misspoke. You are correct. You need to find a system that does more good than harm by a large margin. So if it's 95% good and 5% bad, well then, like I said, no system's perfect, because humans aren't perfect. Right. We're fallible.
And somebody will go and clip you saying, see, she wants to let all the perpetrators go free. That's not what she's saying, right? But it goes back to, was it Benjamin Franklin said, better one guilty man go free than 10, or was it one innocent?
Whatever. One guilty man, 10
innocent.
No, it's 10 guilty men go free than one innocent
man. Thank you. And again, I fully believe that if someone is in fact guilty, not only should they be held accountable, I'm not opposed to prison justice, if you know what I mean. We'll just leave it at that, because that's usually what happens to those people. And I don't have a problem with that, to be honest. But we're at the point now, and Ryan was on earlier. Ryan went to jail for 4 months, I believe it was. Sat in jail for 4 months and was 100% innocent. Yet his accuser, who was proven to have lied, put him in jail, got a few months, and oh, by the way, got herself pregnant and got out. How is that justice? If what we're talking about is ultimately justice, it needs to be applied equally both ways.
Well, yeah, isn't it the old adage that justice is blind? And if you look at Lady Justice with her scales, she's wearing a blindfold because she's not supposed to see what the person looks like. You're guilty either way. Guilty is guilty. But it's not being applied that way. It's well, it's like bowling with handicaps. Guys get no handicaps. Women have so many handicaps that you're practically guiding the ball on like a lead, and that's not fair. And then you're also, it's also I think not quite misogyny, but definitely sexism, because you're basically saying that women aren't human. We're not as equally capable of doing bad things. You're denying our agency. You're also denying our agency because you're making all the excuses for why we do these things. Oh, like when we were talking in my latest video about a child abuse, and they're like, well, women have more access to children, therefore, and more mental health issues. And I'm like, that sounds an awful lot like an excuse to me.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. I was just going to say that. Yeah.
Because if we're going off of access, women have more access to children, then by that argument, because of the percentage of mothers who harm their children, then no mother should ever have access to her children ever, because it's only a matter of time before she offends. And though, of course, they're like, that's not what I'm saying, but that's what you said. That's what you implied. That may not be what you meant, but that's what you implied.
Right.
And that's a stupid argument anyway. Women are around children more often than fathers. Therefore, of course, they're going to abuse their children more. Huh?
As Mr. Spock said, the logic does not compute. Yeah, we probably shouldn't laugh, but you almost have to, because
it's either that or cry.
Topic. But yeah, it is that. It's exactly right. It's you made an interesting point that I want to kind of touch on myself, which is that they say women can do anything men can do until it comes to being held accountable for things. Then all of a sudden they can't. And again, to your point about child abuse, that means more children suffer, right?
Well, yeah, and we know that it's a problem. So we're going to use this example. We're kind of getting off topic of false allegations, but we're going to use this example.
We'll get back on a track, but it's a good point you're making.
We know that mothers have a higher, they are more dangerous to their children by far. And I told this one girl who was trying to make it about single mothers and single fathers, and I was like, but this isn't about single fathers or single mothers, because technically speaking, you can be in a 2-parent household and still only have one parent, mother or father, who's the sole abuser, even though the other parents in the household. Not only that, but even though the majority of single parent households are considered single mother households, the father is still in the picture in some way in 80% of those, because it's only 1 in 5 that is out without a father. So that's 20% without, or 20% without, and the rest, the 80% with. So even in quote unquote single mother households, because the mother has custody, that's not to say that the father isn't in the picture either. Right. So the only way your argument would hold water is in those cases where there is no other parent possible. But if we know that this is the problem, then I don't know if you realize this, but you just made the single greatest argument for why 50-50 custody should be a standard. Yep. Because if mothers are committing, this horrible amount of child abuse because they're so overwhelmed and stressful and can't do it on their own, then the best thing you can do is lighten the load by letting the dad. And her eyes, I swear her eyes crossed. She was like, does not compute. And then she blocked me, and I'm like, and I won.
Yeah, but you're good. if I may give you a compliment. But let's get back to false allegations, although your points are 100% on point, pun intended. With regard to what you're talking about, though, is I want to get into the victimhood of what really happens with false allegations, because I don't think a lot of people really understand it. The standard argument you'll hear from many people that don't believe there's, there's no false allegations. Come on, Dan. It's such a small number and all that. And once it's proven to be false, the man can just get on with his life. It's no big
Oh
deal.
yeah, that
I
one.
have heard this argument over and over again. And yet I've had probably at this point somewhere around a dozen guys on the podcast who were victims. Some cases years ago, their lives are still destroyed.
So
They'll never, ever get away from that allegation.
So our friend Mr. Panderbear made this comment on
Careful.
on one of the videos, that either his response to you or something else, and someone said, "Yeah, well, if they're innocent, they have nothing to worry about because they'll be proven innocent." And it said, "Except for after, even if the court proves them innocent, now we have the, well, if they weren't guilty, no one would have accused them of anything. They're guilty of something, or I even know he got off. Oh, I know he did it. He just wasn't charged. Even though he was proven innocent, there's always that shadow of doubt that will follow him and probably to the grave."
Well, I've had guys talk about how they carry papers with them to prove their innocence because they get accosted on the street. I've had guys talk about how they've had family members come to blows with them even when they've been proven innocent. Oh, you still did it. Family members, cousins. I've had, I don't know how many guys have lost their jobs, and then when they're proven innocent, still can't get the job back. These allegations never go away. I've talked about Good Time Charlie. I did a podcast with him a couple months ago. Go listen to that podcast and then tell me how, because not only was he proven innocent, the sheriff who did the investigation put out a public video declaring him innocent. When did you ever hear that happening? What public official would ever go to that point? Yet he reached out to me about a month ago saying, "You're not going to believe this." And I'm not going to tell his whole story because that's up to him. But basically, somebody accosted him and declared him guilty. The sheriff has publicly posted a video saying there is no way possible he committed that crime. But yet he's still facing it and will for the rest of his life. People need to understand that when you face a false allegation, it never goes away.
You can't unring a bell and you can't unbreak a window. You can put all the pieces back in the same order, but the cracks are still there. And if you take a baseball and you throw it through someone's window and you shatter the window, even if you put all of the pieces back in like a puzzle, it's still a broken window. You still shattered it. There's no way to unshatter the window. There's no way to unring a bell. And that's what so many people don't understand. Once that black mark is put against you, once that shadow has been, that die has been cast, you can get further and further away from it, but it will always follow you. It's like a ball and chain. And there's no way to escape it. And
not only is there no way to escape it, think about the online record. So what people don't understand is, let's say Lindsay accuses me and I get arrested. That is a public record. It goes into the public record. You can Google that public record. Dan was arrested for whatever allegation she makes. Then let's say a couple months go by and she's proven to have completely made the whole thing up. There is no question I am innocent. The charges are dropped. I'm free to go. There's no public record saying that. So if you were to Google me, you would find that I was arrested for whatever allegation she made, but you would never find I was innocent, ever. Now, what's the first thing an employer does when they get a resume and they're going to interview someone? They Google them. First thing they do. So again, I've had guys that I've interviewed, and we actually stepped through it where we showed his arrest is the number one thing that comes up under his name. Completely innocent. Like, there's no question. There's video proof he's innocent. Okay. Nowhere does it show he was exonerated. And he can't find a job 2 years later.
Well,
you're going to tell me that's justice?
Well, it's the same thing with the registry. We had someone up the street that some kid went missing, and the neighborhood checked the registry, and there's a guy living up there at the registry, and it turns out he's on the registry for something that happened when he was 16 with another 16-year-old. So that's not even against the law, really. But he was charged as an adult because this was
He was charged, but she wasn't, right?
She wasn't. So it was his girlfriend at the time, and they were both in high school at 16, and her parents accused him, I think, because they weren't happy with their daughter's behavior. It takes two, by the way.
Yeah, their little girl wouldn't possibly have done something like that.
And now, but he's on a registry for the rest of his life, he can't get off of it, and it doesn't say it doesn't give details. It just says what you were charged with or why you're on the registry, but it doesn't give any more detail. And so the neighbors are coming after him with the mob with the pitchforks, and no one thought to say, now, wait a minute. How's that fair?
And the problem we have is, and you kind of alluded to this earlier, is even when there is a record, that's very rare that there is, but even when there's a record, there's always that doubt, right? Well, yeah, you were innocent, but come on, she wouldn't have said it if it wasn't true. You know, women would never lie.
Women would never.
Oh my God, come on, Dan. A woman lie? Come on. What's the benefit to her? Police, you know. You're literally destroying someone's life simply because you can in many instances.
And what's absolutely hilarious is that I see more men, and this is the sad truth, more men.
Well.
Sorry.
No, he wanted to give his input.
She's like, yeah.
Gee.
That would be Sansa Stark, Queen in the
You're going to dye her hair purple too now?
I am not. But more men will sit there and say, I've had more men say, women would never, or what would be the benefit? The women are sitting here because every woman I have ever talked to knows someone who's lied. That's a simple fact. And in all of the, I talked about this in the video, the one that I did, the rant where I was replying to you know who, and I said that I've been in victim spaces my entire life, from the time I was 16 and victimized myself all the way up until now. And in those spaces where I'm majority women, I've met dozens, if not hundreds of female victims. Every single one of those female victims knows at least one other woman, a friend, a cousin, and a family member who lied about it.
Mm-hmm.
So women know that other women lie. And then men come on these places and say, well, women never lie. And the women are sitting there going, yeah, we do. That's why we're always not believed, because other women lie. And the men say, no, women don't lie. And I'm like, this is the same thing that happens when females sit there and say, men do this. And the men say, no, we don't. And they go, no, shut up. Yes, you do. It's the same thing in reverse.
Right.
And the only women who won't admit that other women lie, in my experience, are the women who lied. Like they're guilty. They're guilty of it.
Yep.
Because they don't want to admit that other women lie. Because if you're telling the truth, there is absolutely no reason why you can't admit that yes, women lie. Because if you're truly care about the problem, then you care about real victims. And you have to understand that the people who are hurt most by lies are real victims. So when I talk to a woman or come across one online and social media that says women would never lie, I'm like, you lied. I can almost guarantee you at some point
saying that is a lie. So by definition, they're a lie.
Well, yeah, by saying that, making that claim, you're already lying or just willfully ignorant. But I'm almost willing to bet that you at some point made an accusation or alluded to one, and you're trying to absolve yourself. Oh, women would never lie. Women would never lie. I would never lie. Methinks thou protest a little too much.
Well, that's why I always say to guys, when you see women like that, don't walk, run away. Don't engage with them in any way, shape, or form, because they are the ones that are the biggest risk to you. You know, and again, let's be blunt here. It's not every woman. All right. I don't even think it's the majority of women. It's a very small subset, but there are the ones out there, and you don't know, and you will never know, right, until it happens. The one thing, in interviewing people for the book, doing podcasts, my radio show, all that, I have yet to have a single guy say to me anything other than, I never thought this would happen to me. I never thought she would do this to me. Men live in oblivion, good, bad, or indifferent. I'm not laying judgment on that in any way, shape, or form. But we as men need to be awake and our eyes wide open, because it is becoming rampant. I've talked many times. I worked in IT for 30 years. Okay. I worked with HR departments all the time on investigations. And there's a story that's going to be in our book where I share an entire investigation I was involved with, where a guy was at the time what my age is now, 60 years old, and got accused by a girl in her mid-20s, and it was completely made up. And
is this the girl that sent emails to him?
Yes.
Or emails to herself, supposedly from him?
In the 90s, so before cell phones and all that. I had a cell phone that was the size of a briefcase, okay, because I worked in IT. I was lucky to get one, but in that particular situation, she wanted him, and he took it as a joke. Yeah, blah blah. Unfortunately, he made the mistake of going to her house a week or two prior to that to help her fix something, and he rejected her. Okay. Lo and behold, a few days later, out comes the allegation, and she had emails proving he did it. She dummied them all up. And get the book when it comes out to get the full story. But long story short, I got lucky and found the email she sent to him. Otherwise, he would have lost his job, lost his career, and likely gone to jail, because the allegations she was making were pretty serious. And she got, what she got? Not even a slap on. She got a talking to. That was it. And that's why I always say to guys, you may think it's never going to happen to you. Like, the panda bear we're referring to said in his initial video that you only need to worry, if you're someone that would actually do something. No innocent man, I'm paraphrasing, should ever have to think or worry about a false allegation. Wrong.
I came up with a really good analogy for that. That's like saying safe drivers don't need to worry about accidents.
Yeah, okay.
Because who's expecting to get T-boned by a 18-wheeler? No one. No one sees until it happens. No one's like, I left my house knowing I was going to get in an accident today.
And the sad thing is when those guys make those comments and follow it up by saying all men lie, except them, of course,
me.
Right? I would never lie, but every other man on the planet lies. These guys are steering men down a very bad road, because, I talked about Ryan. I've talked about many others that I've interviewed. They went to jail for weeks, months. One I know of was 2 years before his trial got adjudicated, and he was proven innocent. And they're out hundreds of thousands of dollars. It's something that is just horrific when it happens to someone. And these guys that are out there going, oh, it's no big deal, or trying to minimize the whole thing. They're pandering to try and get likes and clicks and attention from females. And they don't care if a man, Inquisitor Ghost, anyone, 6 months ago, unalived himself because of a false allegation.
Well, what's interesting, and I mentioned this in the comment section, someone accused me of it, because I'm saying that our panda bear, you should never. I said you should always be aware of any man who sits there and tells you everything you want to hear, validates you, applauds you, tells you you're a perfect angel and you're not capable of doing anything wrong. And then someone turned around and said, "Isn't that what you're doing with men? Because you're a men's activist?" I said, No, because I tell men what they need to hear, not necessarily what they want to hear. And sometimes what they
I
need to
can
hear is
verify that.
definitely not what they want to hear.
I can verify that's exactly what she does, because she tells me what I need to hear more often than I.
And it's true. It's like being a parent. You're not your kid's friend. You
Yeah,
tell them
exactly.
what they need to hear, because truly loving someone is wanting them to do what is best for themselves. And that includes not letting themselves hold themselves back.
Right.
So sometimes you have to be the bad guy. And with the guys that I've told plenty of men when I deal with their court cases, like, that's you're doing it wrong. Stop. Well, what? No. And I tell them what they don't want to hear, and then they sometimes one of them stopped talking to me for about a month before he came back and said, "You were right." And I was like, "I'm not even going to touch that. We're just going to move on and continue on with your case. I'm not going to lord it over you, because although I really, really wanted to, because he was nasty to me, but I bit my tongue, which is not like me, but I bit my tongue
I was going
because
to
we had
say that. You will
well,
bite your tongue?
there were 3 kids involved in this case, and I wasn't gonna lord it over the dad because he was trying to help them get away from their really not nice mom. So I was like, for their sake, I'm gonna swallow my words, bite my tongue, and just move on from here. Um, and that's the difference. I'll tell a guy, even when I'm advocating for, look, dumbass, this you're not helping yourself. You're in your own way. Get
Right.
out of it, or get off the ride. And that's not what they want to hear. The difference between what I'm doing, what you're doing, because you also do the same thing. You don't always tell guys what they want to hear. Um,
Exactly.
and but these guys won't. They'll bend over backwards to tell women what they want to hear. And that's suspect anyway. I'm like, you know who else talks like this? Cult leaders.
Well, before we came on air, you were referring, we're not naming names, people. We're not going to name names, okay? Because we don't want to get in trouble with the internet gods. But if you go watch our videos in the last couple of days, you'll figure out pretty quick who we're referring to. But that particular person has several comments on his videos, and you were saying how his followers, they're making comments to you, but he's not. He's purposely not saying anything because he doesn't want to appear that he's attacking a woman, but he's got no problem attacking me, and it just shows that what they're trying to do, which is, pander. That's why we call them pander bears. And honestly, I think they're hurting women more than they're helping them. It goes back to what we said at the very beginning, which is, when they create that narrative that all men lie, women believe that. They tell themselves that all the time. Oh, every man on the planet lies. Well, if you think that and you believe that, you're never going to have a healthy interaction with a male, whether it's in a relationship, a coworker, whatever. You're living your life in fear at that point.
They're also isolating yourself, because if all men lie and they get in trouble, who are they supposed to call other than Ghostbusters?
Well, you're going to call the one guy who would never lie,
or they won't call anyone, and they'll put themselves in danger, because most police officers are men, most first responders are men, most firefighters are men.
Yeah.
The people who are coming to your rescue are usually men. Not to say women don't do these jobs too, but predominantly most of them are men. So if people have these women convinced that all men lie, they'll purposely allow themselves to stay in some very dangerous situations, because men will never help me. And the sad fact of the matter is that women can't help them, especially if the person being aggressive towards them is a man. Hopefully they'd be smart enough to call a bigger, meaner man to come take down the coward man, because only cowardly men hurt people that are weaker than them, in my personal opinion. But they would be calling a bigger man to come take down this one. And they can call a woman, but like, if I were to show up to defend someone against their boyfriend who's, I don't know, Mr. Squirrely's size, I'd lose.
Well, I mean, I was kind of chuckling as I'm reading some of the comments that are coming in as you're talking about this, and we're talking about this, and we're going to get to the comments in a couple more minutes. But to Lindsay's point, I mean, how many times have you been told in your life you need to fear men, or it was implied to you? And now you don't, right? But
Oh, it's been shoved down my throat from cradle to now, from cradle to grave, from the minute
so
I
what?
stepped in school in kindergarten all the way up
That's my
to even
point,
now.
right? So you're smart enough to not believe that or fall into that, but there are plenty of women, unfortunately, that do believe that. You know, when I've interacted with them, of course, they see me as this big ogre. But when you interact with them and try and talk to them and say, it's not all the guys, what is the response you get from them as a peer?
Well, I usually get told that it's all men, and then I was like, okay, do you have a brother? Well, yeah. Is it him? Well, no. Well, your brother's male. Are you a mother? Well, yeah. Do you have children? Are they boys? Yeah. Okay, so you're raising future rapists? No, my boys would never. You
That's
said
not what she
all.
said.
That's not what you said. You said
Yep.
all. So your father, your brother, your male friends, your all these people are all just as guilty. It's all men except the ones you know. But to some random stranger, like to me, I don't know them.
Hmm.
So does that mean they're my all? I've gotten a couple of switched that way, but the one thing that I have noticed about the women who fall for that line that it's all men, do you know what the ones that don't, like myself, that we all have in common?
Purple hair.
We had fathers who were allowed to be
Sorry,
fathers.
I had to go there. I'm sorry.
We had dads that were allowed to be dads.
Yeah, you would have had normal, healthy relationship with your father,
Yes, and
or were allowed to in some cases, because there's
or
people.
allowed to in some cases, or we had another healthy male figure, be
Right.
it an uncle or a grandfather, or in some cases, all of them combined.
Right.
And I have it is unfortunate, going back to the thing about we talk about child abuse and single mother homes, is the absence of fathers means that a lot of daughters are growing up without that uh role model of this is what a good man looks like. So then they're going out into the world and they're looking for good men in all the wrong places. Like dumbasses on the internet
Well,
who say, "Trust me," but not everyone
yeah,
else.
and again, we're not going to name names, but one of those pander bears got caught not too long ago, um, and got found out for being the little panda bear that he is, and what a danger he is. So, they're out there, and I actually feel for the women that fall into that. I don't want to put them down in any way, because, like you said, it's been drilled into you since birth. So I can understand how someone could actually just follow that person's lead. Like you said, it's like a cult almost.
Well,
But they're not trying to help these women; they're actually trying to hurt them
it's like
in their home.
my aunt, we were talking about something completely different, but she said, the people who learn how to like write and stuff with their feet because they've never had arms. Like
Mhm.
if I were to lose an arm, I'd miss it because I remember having it. But some people have never, that you can't miss what you don't have never
Right,
had.
right.
And in the cases of the women that I feel pity for them, but I don't necessarily blame them for thinking the way they do because they never had a good example.
Exactly. That's exactly my point too. Yeah.
So I don't necessarily blame them for why they think that way, but it's still problematic because you're actually hurting yourself. It's to your detriment that you
Mhm.
believe the bad men, and then you've not had a good experience or a good example of a man, and then the first man you meet is a cult leader basically, and you get burned by that. So it's once bitten twice shy, and I totally understand why you feel that way.
Mhm.
But at the same time, eventually you're going to come across an actual good man, and you can't bleed on people that didn't cut you, or you're going to bleed on people that didn't cut you.
Right.
And you're actually creating more victims by doing that. You're doing
A-
more harm than good.
And I actually, by the way, see the same thing on the other side.
Yes.
There are guys out there, and women, to be honest, that are pandering to guys who've been hurt in divorce, lost their children, and all that, and telling them what they want to hear, not what they need to hear. And again, that it's a separate issue, but they're kind of intertwined. There's similarities between them, and that's where I think that's what separates. And I'm not trying to tout my horn or yours, but what separates you and I is we tell it like it is. You may not like what we're hearing. In fact, you're probably going to hate it in many cases, because I will tell guys point blank, because I get guys that, they want me to help them with their divorce, and they'll coach, they'll take on my coaching services. And the first conversation I have with them in the first 2 minutes is, I am not going to tell you what you want to hear. I'm going to tell you what you need to hear, because that's my job. And some of them don't like it. Some of them say, well, then I don't want you to coach me. That's fine. Because if you're not willing to hear the bad, if you think you're going to go in and do this in family court, or you're facing a false allegation and you're just going to, walk away, and it's going to be, no, I'm going to tell you the realities of it all. And then you're going to learn to deal with it. And then I'll help you. But it's kind of where we're at with all of society now. You're seeing this across not just the issues we're talking about, but everywhere, where people just have lost their ability to think and to reason and say, well, it's not all guys. Or if it is all guys, well, then by definition, it's got to be all women, because we can't make an exception for one side than the other. It's ludicrous, to be honest with you. But there are good men, there are bad men, there are good women, there are bad women. That's the bottom line. And I hate to break it to everyone, but the overwhelming majority of both men and women are good. I'm going to get off my soapbox. You go now.
No, you're absolutely right. The majority of people out there are good, decent people. They're not perfect people, but they're good, decent people. But a lot of people want to come in guns blazing, like they're, they've watched My Cousin Vinny one too many times. I'm going to do this, or Law and Order. I'm like, that's not how this works. And it's like, look, you either want to succeed or you can win, but succeeding isn't necessarily akin to winning, and winning isn't necessarily akin to succeeding. So what are your goals? What are you looking at to get out of this? Do you want custody of your kids, or do you want to get back at your ex? Because you can't have both. And to dad's credit, in most cases, the dads will sit there and say, I want my kids. They will bend over backwards and take whatever the mom gives them with a smile on their face. Well, not necessarily a smile on their face, but you know what I mean? If that means that in the end they have their kids. Women I see aren't willing to do that. They hate their ex more than they supposedly love their children. And then they use their children to hurt their ex. Now, that's not to say that some dads don't weaponize their children too, because both sides do it.
Absolutely.
But I see it happen. Yeah. I see women doing it more because they're the ones who are being coached how to do it. And by the way, women have been doing this historically for a very long time. So this is not a new phenomenon. It's just become more prevalent and more, I guess, acknowledged and known as our world.
Well, social media has exploded it. That's the big change. It's been around forever. I was dealing with false allegations in the, investigations in the 80s and 90s. Where, I was talking with a couple of IT buddies of mine, because, when you're in IT, generally you're going to be called in if there's any kind of computer or potential computer thing with it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they're telling me, they're like, you have no idea. And I have clients on my fitness side that are HR people, and they're at the point now, they're universally saying, we want to get out. We don't want to do HR anymore because we're sick of all this, because they're dealing with constant false allegations. Saying something like, gee, Lindsay, your hair looks wonderful, even though it's purple. And then you file a false allegation. That's harassment. That's exactly what's happening. And that, when we're at that level, in the business, the company can't function. The HR department becomes paralyzed because, well, I got to deal with this one. She's mad because he said I look good in this dress. This one's mad because, he might have looked at her the wrong way. You see it in the gyms. I just did a video about the gym bunnies walking around half naked, you know, and looking to get guys in trouble. That's really what I didn't say that in the video, but
I
and I
saw
have
that. I saw that video. I almost want to find one of these women, and I'm not even Christian, but I would throw a Bible at them and go, "You need Jesus and some clothes."
well, I mentioned in the comments because having been a gym owner and having a security system, I hate to break it to you people, but there's cameras all over your gyms, whether you want to acknowledge it or not. The only place they're not is in the locker room and bathroom. Okay. I have videos, okay, because they're hilarious. And the thing is, when you own a gym, your insurance company, if they're anywhere decent, will have a conversation with you about because this is the conversation that was had to me when I first had my gym. I didn't have cameras. You're going to get cameras. Well, why? Well, okay, and I said, well, because somebody gets injured. No, well, yeah, that's it, but that's not the big reason. Well, why? False allegations is the number one thing they're worried about when they insure gyms. All right. But the other thing now is they're starting to see cases or attempts to file claims based on, these women strutting around. And I hate to break it to you, it's the other women who are filing them against the gym buddy. It's
Well,
not the men.
so I see this argument. They're like, "We're not wearing it for men." I go, "Oh yeah, then why don't when you work out in your living room, why are you wearing sweats and an oversized t-shirt? What's the difference if you're not dressing for men?" And they're like, "Oh, well, I look cute." Okay. And do you look cute to other women or do you look cute for men? Because what women find cute and what men find cute are two entirely different things. And that ain't cute. And,
Well,
and
it's
the thing
hilarious
that,
because
well,
I have training groups online, which are women, right? Group trainings that not a one of them wears those outfits, right? They're they're in, sweatpants, they're in, sweatshirts, baggy stuff, all this. And I've
well,
had this conversation with them, and they're like, why would I ever wear something like that?
well, I
You
just
know,
look at it and I'm like, that looks uncomfortable.
it's also,
I
by
don't
the way,
care how stretchy it is. It's uncomfortable. Not only that, yes, you have a right to wear whatever you want in the comfort of your own home. I have the right when I go out in public not to see all of you.
well, not only that, it's also, by the way, a health risk because, the more skin that's out, the more sweat you're leaving all over the place. And if you ever watch those gym bunnies, they never got a towel with them. Just saying. Just saying. All right. I know we could go. I could go a whole hour on it. You're going to get me fired up on it. Let's get to the comments, Linz, because there's thousands of them. I can't. There's no way we're going to get to them all. Can
Okay,
you
read
see any of the
I
comments?
can't. I can see the ones off of I think YouTube. I can see Curtis Bauer. He's
All right.
on
Why don't
YouTube, all right?
all right. You can talk because I see Curtis's too. But go
You froze.
ahead and listen to talk about what Curtis said.
He's talking about a representative, Steve Holt, stated on video a month ago that he doesn't believe in protected classes. However, he does everything he can to protect women from having to take accountability for anything. Yes. So I see a lot of that is we don't believe in protected classes. They'll say one thing, talking out of one side of the mouth and doing something, talking on both sides of your mouth. They'll say one thing and do the other. Well, actions speak louder than words. So when it comes to politicians, I don't care what they say. I'm going to look at their voting records and what they actually do, what policies they support, what who they listen to, what they propose, what they actually do. And I don't care what side of the aisle you on. I don't care if you're my guy or not. If you sit in that office and you do absolutely jack diddly squat, then I'm going to vote for the other guy the next term just to get you out.
Yeah, just to reference what Curtis is talking about, because I'm very familiar with the situation. Curtis is in Iowa. Representative Steve Holt heads the Republican Party in the House, I believe, in Iowa. Correct me if I'm wrong, Curtis. And he is the one who's blocking shared parenting. He is a Republican. They have a Republican supermajority there. And that's why I call them out all the time. And the Democrats are no better. Trust me. I've lobbied forever. So I know. All right, let me jump over to Instagram. I got some really good comments here. I'm going to scroll through as many as I can get to quick. Thor Bain said, he was talking about false allegation and being made in family court. I'm going through this right now. No one cares about the kids. Witness my ex lie, and they're still plugging away. That's never counted as a false allegation. It doesn't show up in the statistics anywhere.
No, the thing that I pulled, someone asked me for a legitimate source for these false allegations because I mentioned that most of them are never charged and most of them happen in family court. I specified family court.
Mm-hmm.
And they asked for a legitimate source. Said, first question, if I give you one, are you actually going to accept it as legitimate? And they go, oh yeah, sure. No, but I'll play your game and you will pretend. So then I went down and found a really good study done by the, I think, National Health, Mental Health, something. Anyway, it had a long acronym, but they spent 10 pages talking about the methodology and how they kept biases out of it. Any study that goes into that kind of depth about their methodology, I mean, they're transparent like glass, which is good. And then you get down to the conclusions. They had more methodology than they did conclusions. Their conclusions was that the number one, to talk about parental alienation, the number one thing that all of the judges saw was making false allegations against the other parent in order to sever the tie between the child and the other parent and the child.
Essentially gain custody and child support.
Yes. And all of the judges, all 20 of them, they all saw this numerous times. And the number one type of false allegation was sexual abuse.
Yep.
So they're right there proves that good men have something to fear, because how many millions of fathers are going through custody trials?
Every single year, there's millions of those allegations made in family court.
And none of them show any.
70% of the cases involve an allegation proven false. There are some that are proven true. Don't get me wrong. They always say that the false allegations are the small number. In family court, it's the exact opposite. The overwhelming majority are proven to be false.
Well, yeah,
it's a very small number that's proven to be true.
In the UK, they've caught lawyers who will sit there and say, the government assistant, the lawyers, the women will only get the lawyers if they'll get free legal representation. Yeah. If they make an allegation, or if they're defending their children from abusive partner. So the lawyers will sit there and say, okay, the first thing you're going to do is accuse him of XYZ. Well, he's not guilty. I know he's not guilty, but you're going to accuse him because then you're going to get free legal representation, or counsel. They call it counsel in the UK. And none of this ever makes it into any database on false allegations, which is why I say it is rampant. And it truly is a hidden epidemic because no one is talking about it.
Yeah, there's a thing. If you actually talk to a reasonable divorce attorney, not one of the ones that's out to make millions of dollars, but one who's in it for the right reasons, who tend to burn out quickly, by the way. But the ones that are in it right will tell you that they will ask every client if there is domestic violence or, SA or any of that, because they have to. And I don't fault them for that. Most of them, the good ones, will say, we can tell just by how they answer whether there is or not. The bad ones, that becomes their default. Wink, wink, is there abuse going on? Wink, wink, and then they run with it. And those are the bad ones.
Someone will say no. They're like, are you sure?
Yeah, and they're the ones that clog up family court. So again, it goes back to what we're talking about. The actual abuse cases don't get addressed then. Let me get back to some more comments. Thor Bain said, lying to investors, he put it's investigators, is often a misdemeanor. Perjury is a felony. That's true in many cases. But even with perjury charges, and he actually has a comment later, the problem is you got to prove that there was intent in the perjury. And, they got to say, well, I believe it. And exactly what I was going to say, too. It's very difficult. And that's why that is one reason. I'm not defending them for not prosecuting false allegations, but that is one reason why they don't. Superfly Wonderfish said, am I correct in saying they don't want to dissuade people from reporting because the conviction rate is so low? Meaning SA allegations?
One of the reasons why the conviction rate is lower than other crimes is because it is hard to prove with physical evidence. The national list of exonerations, we've had 250 men in the last 10 years, 15 years be exonerated with DNA evidence. So these are men who were put in jail on in some cases, one man served 40 years. Michelle just did Reclaiming a Voice just did a video on it. One man served 40 years on her word alone.
Yep, I'm familiar
and
with
no physical evidence. That's why it's so hard, because a lot of these cases with SA, the evidence is quickly, your body gets rid of the evidence. There's no the bruises don't last very long. Very few women are and men too, very few SAs or grapes are so violent that you're going to have physical evidence, visible physical evidence, months and months later, which is a good thing, because I wouldn't wish that on anyone, but it does make it difficult to prove beyond a shadow of a doubt. And often it's he said, she said. And then at the same time, you also get into, especially with the trials that go with juries, then you have to convince a jury that they're whoever is telling the truth. And the juries know the same thing Dan and I know, that people lie. So it is very unfortunate that it's not a higher conviction rate, but I can understand why it is sometimes so hard to prove.
And I'm not going to add anything to it because you spoke so eloquently about it. One question that did come up in that case, they are asking, did she get charged? I'm not aware that she did. I don't believe she's been charged, the woman that put the guy in jail for 40 years.
No, she
I
wasn't.
don't believe that she's been charged. So, all right, Dodge 67 is what blows my mind is women have falsely accused men several times and the legal system never catches on. I want to address that briefly, if I may, which is this is a very good point because it is often a pattern where one woman will make accusation against man after man after man after man. I went in depth in this on one of my podcasts. I forget which guest it was, but he was talking about how the person that accused him, the woman that accused him, they found a track record going back years. Literally every person she was involved with, she filed a false allegation against.
Well, didn't
It's
the woman in
fact you go to.
the woman in the UK that just got put in jail for false allegations, she made 9 of them.
Yeah, that's another one. There's a good point. Yeah.
And she's one of the first women who that's ever happened to. They saw the pattern. But just like most rapists are serial rapists, so people that offend multiple times, they have multiple victims, but the actual person doing the offending is the same person. And this is also true of serial false accusers. They'll do it until it, just like the movie companies that make like what are we on, Land Before Time 58 by now, they'll keep making the movies until they don't make money anymore. They're going to keep they're going to keep doing the same playbook over and over and over again until it doesn't work for them anymore. As long as they get away with it, they're going to keep doing it.
There's a little troll that's coming at you. I'm not going to repeat what he said, but I believe it's a she masquerading as a he, attacking you. Check out Instagram later on. You'll see it. I'm just going to leave it at that. I'm almost certain it's a woman acting like a man because they do that. I know that's shocking to people. All right. There was another comment I had on here. I wanted to end Instagram too. Well, Carly Suarez said every single one of the politicians don't care anything about these type of things. I'm paraphrasing it a little bit, and that's true. They don't. They don't want to deal with it because it's political dynamite for them, right? So they will do anything and everything they can to avoid it. The best advice I can give anyone watching this, we got major elections coming up. Reach out to the politicians that are, whether it's local, state, federal level, and ask them the questions. I'll tell you the questions I'm asking every single potential Whoop, we blinked on tick. There we go. The questions I'm asking every single potential person that I might vote for from both parties. One, will you support funding to create domestic violence shelters for men, either locally in our state or at the federal level? Two, do you support family court reform and shared parenting, local, state, federal? Three, do you support funding for male victims of mental illness? Because most of the funding is directed at women. Those are the three bugaboos that I do. And then the fourth one I'll throw out is education. What are you going to do about boys lagging behind in education? Every person listening to that, you should be asking, if you care about this stuff, you should be asking the politicians, both parties. 90% of them will not answer you. So you've got to be persistent. And then, ask them a couple times. And then the third time say, my assumption is going to be, and I'm going to state this publicly, that you do not support, for example, funding for male victims of domestic violence. They ain't going to like that. But that's how you got to get their attention. Again, I'll get off my soapbox.
So we have a comment on YouTube, I believe. GNTV says, "I'm new here. I'm a mother of 2 young men. Why aren't these ladies prosecuted? They aren't prosecuted because women are a protected class. That's the truth. And women's interest groups like the Ninnies from Now will have an absolute field day. The only time I ever see women prosecuted for stuff like this is when they, unalive their children in bathtubs, and even then, sometimes they get a slap on the wrist by, oh, they had postpartum depression. That doesn't matter. The kid is still not here. The kid is still dead, and it doesn't matter what the excuse is. And the thing is, I might be willing to believe that mental health is a excuse if the excuse were still legitimate, if the dad were to do it. But there was actually a case, I forget, in New Zealand recently, where a dad had a mental break, a psychotic break, and unalived his entire family. And he was, including, I believe, 3 children. I don't know. I'll try and find. I hadn't
heard about this one. Yeah,
I'll try and find it. He was sentenced to life in prison. There was no slap on the wrist. There was no, oh, that poor man that didn't have any help and his poor mental health. But if a woman were to do that, the exact same thing, she gets 6 months. If that. And oh, that poor woman, her babies are gone. Yeah, because she unalived them.
Unfortunately, yeah.
And it's unfortunate, but most people won't charge women because it is a holdover of one of the last true examples of misogyny. It's because people think that women are too fragile to deal with the consequences of their own actions.
I have nothing to add. You spoke again so eloquently. By the way, your hair looks fabulous right now. I want you to know that. I think you should keep it. And the reason I went there also is because Angel Warrior, way back in the beginning of this, I hope he's still on, said, okay, Dan, I got to ask, what color was your hair back in the day? It was flaming orange when I was younger, and then went to a deeper red in my teens, which is why I have white hair, not gray. That's why Santa Claus is a redhead, because redheads cannot get gray hair. Enough said on that. Hopefully that answers Angel Warrior. I might dye my head purple for you, Joe. I know I'm picking on you. Packers fan said false allegations need to have accountability, but there are none. Yep, and DAs won't do poop about it. That's true. Donald Harris said, I want to move to Brazil to date me a young Brazilian lady. I can live good on my retirement there. I'd be careful going there too, because I've heard from the guys in Brazil that things are not going well for them there. Nothing to add to that?
You're honestly better going to a more traditional country. Brazil has become more westernized, even though it's in Latin America, or not really Latin America, but it's predominantly Spanish influence, but it's been too westernized.
Yeah, I've actually talked with a couple of guys from Brazil recently, 4 or 5 months ago, and they said it's getting as bad there as it is in the States. So Scotty said, I'm 50 and I've had 2 false allegations. One, she claimed a child was mine. Paternity fraud is also a false allegation.
Yes, it
but that
is.
doesn't stand anywhere. We got to put that one in the book. And he was physically abused. It's what we're working on the book. Both of us are very busy and we're dedicating as much time as we can to it, but we're going to be sharing stories. So for those of you listening to this, if you have a story, we can't get everybody's story in, but if you're someone, for example, paternity fraud is a false allegation, we would potentially want to interview you and have your story put in the book. We want to represent all the different stories because everybody equates it to grape and SA, but false allegations run the gamut.
I've also seen a friend of mine also mentioned that sometimes he's known friends who the threat of false allegation has been used as a coercion tactic for female on male rape. Either you
Actually,
do what I want
you
to, you do what I want you to, or I'm going to accuse you of XYZ. And that is most definitely a form of coercion, which I consider coercive rape.
So you thoughtful figured it out, commented a little bit back ago. I know a guy who had a lady say, if you don't do me, I'll say you R-worded me. And I've heard that from, it's not a ton of times I've heard it, but I've heard it from enough guys. It does happen. And unfortunately, this is where guys need to wake up and understand that this could happen to you. And somebody else just right near that said, I took one of the accusers, I guess he was accused, took one of the accusers to a bar and put a micro recorder under the table to record their false charges. That is something that, we're not lawyers. I'm not advocating you break the law. Okay. But let's just say I'm getting to the point where I'm going to be wearing a body cam at all times.
Oh, my boys are not allowed to date until they're about 28 and they're not leaving the house without a GoPro.
My viewpoint on it is this. To the best of my knowledge, again, I'm not a lawyer. We're not giving you legal advice. We're not advising you to break the law. But if you're in a state where you need 2-party consent, the best of my knowledge, it's a misdemeanor or you might get up to a year in jail. It's that versus life in prison if she claims you art her.
I'm not telling y'all to break the law, but it would be better. It's better to be tried by 12 than carried by 6.
I'm just saying. I have a script written. I haven't done the video. I wrote the script, believe it or not, last fall, where I talk about things guys need to do to protect themselves. And one of the things I say is wear a body cam at all times now. And go to your work and say to your HR department and your management, I am wearing a body cam at work. If you have a problem with it, then we need to have a discussion and you're going to need to sign a form because I am afraid I might face a false allegation. And the only way I can protect myself is by wearing a body cam. You're going to put them in a really difficult position by doing that. Because if they then deny you and then someone makes a false allegation, well, I tried to protect myself and you wouldn't let me. The other thing I would say to guys is if you are in a office or a place of business, you go to HR, you go to management, and you say, I do not want to be alone in a room with any female. There has to be a third party there at all times. And that includes if you have a female boss and you're going in to get your performance review. Because what's to say she can't make a false allegation? And oh, by the way, some of you are going, that doesn't happen. Go check out my podcast.
Oh, yeah.
Check out the podcast. Okay. Because I've had guys on that had exactly that happen. So it is what it is. We only got a couple minutes. I just want to go ahead if you got anything because I'm just
I don't have anything. I still can't. I can't see on. Oh, I can finally scroll on Instagram. No, I can't. It won't let me go too high.
Kyle, I'm not going to get to all the comments, but I want to touch on something that said the man-hating women creators are just selling a product of drama to make the TikTok money. That's what the male feminists are doing also, by the way. They're trying to get clicks and likes to make money. That's if millions on TikTok. I can tell you right now, I'll just become a male feminist. I know exactly how to do it. And I'd make millions because I know what to say, how to say it, and get them all stirred up. But I would never do something like that.
I wouldn't have to even talk. I just have to take my clothes off. If I were doing it for the money, but I'm not. People say, we're like, well, you're just doing this to get validation from men. I go, first of all, that's a misogynistic take. You go, no, it's not. I go, yes, because calling me a pick-me, you have reduced my sole motivation to external male validation, which you've removed my agency from me, because I wouldn't possibly have these opinions of my own accord. No, the only reason I think this way is because I'm looking for male validation, which is incredibly sexist and misogynistic. But if I were truly doing this for validation, I would not be doing this particular thing. I would be doing something entirely different.
There's much better ways to get it.
Much better ways to do that than trying to fight literally uphill, upstream in a teeny tiny boat with no life preserve at all, which in shark and crocodile infested water sometimes it feels like.
Quick one I want you to comment on. Jane Ann said, I don't understand why women would lie about the R word and the A word. You want to make a comment on that? Why would they do that?
To hurt people. That's why most of them do it. Excluding the people that are trying to get stuff out of famous men, the number 2 reasons why people I personally know lie about it is either to get out of trouble. They cheated. They snuck out of their house when they were teenagers and they didn't want to get in trouble. They got caught doing something they weren't supposed to, so they need to deflect. So they're trying to get out of trouble, or they're doing it to punish someone else because they know that they'll be believed. And even if they aren't believed, the general consensus is if he weren't guilty, she wouldn't accuse him. Society has been trained to believe women. That's why they would do it. And in a perfect world, yes, because as a victim myself, we would like to think that no one would ever lie about something so heinous. But I can't, in good conscience, keep blinders on to the reality that there are lots of truly horrible women out there who will weaponize real victims' traumas. So they'll appropriate the traumas of real women who've gone through these things for themselves and then use it as a weapon to hurt someone.
Yeah, final comment I'll make on that, in having spoke with law enforcement, the number one reason they see is revenge. That's what they'll tell you. She's doing it to get revenge on him for whatever slight she feels. Final comment I'm going to mention is You Thoughtful figured it out, said he'll promote our book once we get it done. So I guess we better get it done, huh?
Yeah. Got to get rid of the husband, the dogs, and the kids if I want to write for more than 2 hours.
I think what we need to do is follow, I forget who the author was, but there was an author, it's one of the big ones. It might have been Tom Clancy. It was one of them. Used to rent a hotel room for a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks, whatever it took to write the book and sequester himself in the hotel room, no internet, no TV, nothing, and write the book. I may have to do that to get my parts done, but we'll see. All right, guys, we got to wrap things up. There's a ton of comments I didn't get to, and I apologize for that. We Lindy and I, sometimes we get rolling in a good way. I do want to say, CP the Vet, thank you for the heart. Bad PR, thank you for the roses. And guys, we're here every Wednesday from 4 to 5:30 p.m. Eastern. And we have a wide variety of topics. Today we talked about false allegations. We've talked about dating. We've talked about, I don't even remember anymore. We've had fun every once in a while.
Dad jokes. That was a memorable one.
That was one of my favorite all-time ones. Come back and see us every week. Podcast goes up every Sunday where I interview various guests. There will not be one this Sunday because it's Easter Sunday and nobody will watch it, so I didn't bother doing one for this Sunday. But there will be a repeat, and the repeat, because I just saw her name pop up, is going to be someone who's big on TikTok, Sarah Eaton. I think you mentioned her earlier. Mm-hmm. I interviewed her a couple weeks back, and that podcast has done well, so I'll be pushing that one and sharing some of the highlights from it. Anything else you want to add before we wrap it up?
No, not really. I think we did a pretty good job this time.
Pretty good job. And stay tuned for the book, guys, because I mean, Lindsay and I's goal is to really open people's eyes with it. Agreed?
Agreed.
All right, say goodnight, Gracie.
Good night.
No, you're supposed to say goodnight, Gracie. You're not old